Breaking news this week, as the governor announces that restaurants across Connecticut will soon be allowed to expand their indoor capacity. We're talking about the news with Connecticut Restaurant Association Executive Director Scott Dolch. Plus, Connecticut voters are asking for absentee ballots this election season, seeing them as safer alternatives than going to the polling locations in person. Could that mean a delay in election results? And what kind of legal issues does voting this way raise? Attorney Richard Roberts has answers. Plus, how college newspapers are rising to the challenge of reporting on COVID-19 on campus. We're talking to the editors of the papers at UConn and Quinnipiac. It's all straight ahead this Sunday, September 27th, 2020.
From Eyewitness News, Connecticut's most watched local political program, this is Face the State.
Good morning and thanks for joining us on Face the State. I'm Mike Savino. Connecticut restaurants, good news this week, as the governor announces we're heading into phase 3 of our state's reopening plan. Here to talk about what that means for eateries across the state is Connecticut Restaurant Association Executive Director Scott Dolch. Scott, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Mike, for having me.
And first, just your reaction to this news that we'll be seeing expanded capacity, especially at a time when restaurants are going to start seeing their outdoor dining become less popular with customers.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a good day for our restaurants and the announcement, from the governor. I think it's a lot of work that's gone into this. I think, obviously we put phase 3 on pause back in July and understood some of the reasonings behind that with some of the spikes across the country. So, to get here to this point, obviously we're still waiting until October 8th to make that step forward. But I think it helps tremendously for the restaurants as we look to try to increase our capacity inside and get our customers inside as the weather starts to turn. But also, the private event world, that's a big part of our industry as well. Being able to increase those numbers, I think, are extremely important to help the restaurants, private event caterers, and give them an opportunity to survive this.
Now, as you mentioned, this starts on October 8th. How are restaurants doing right now? And is that going to be soon enough for restaurants to really get by?
No, it's a question, Mike, that I struggle with every day. I really think, it's been a difficult road. It's been a difficult 6 months. I think, the PPP funding, the federal funding has kind of run out. That was a 2-month forgivable loan, and these restaurants, perception doesn't equal reality of what people think of outdoor dining. Most of the inside of their restaurants where they might have 50 or 60 tables, maybe 8 outside are packed, but no one's, we've got to get people inside. So understanding the business model, it is about survival right now. It's about, finding different revenue streams, whether it's takeout, to go, obviously to go alcohol was a big part. We're going to continue to look at different ways that these restaurants it's survival. There's no other way to describe it. And I think my concern is, every single day is a new day that I get another call of a restaurant that unfortunately has to close their doors. And I'm hoping that we can do everything we can, not just in capacity increases, but also look at other ways to fund and state and federal funding to help them.
And you mentioned, of course, private events being impacted by this executive order. What does this mean for restaurants that can host private events, especially as we move into the holiday season and the number of parties that we typically see around that time?
Yeah, I mean, that was a sector of the industry that I felt never moved forward. I know they were at 25 inside, 100 outside, for the last couple months, but, not a lot of people want to hire a private event or restaurants to do that. They've just done it on their own. And I think that was important for us with the governor. We had a meeting with him last week in Middletown with 10 business leaders really focused on that area and trying to give them the personal stories of the amount of money that's been lost, the amount of employees they weren't able to bring back. And I think that's a big step forward going inside at 100 people or 150 people outside. There's still restrictions. Obviously, you need to have 50% of your capacity. So your venue has to have over 200 to get there. You got to follow the strict social distancing guidelines, which I know they'll do. But I think the thing that we continue to speak to the governor about is you've given restaurants an opportunity. We took on that responsibility since May 20th and June 17th with outdoor dining and indoor dining. We've done a great job, and give this other part of our industry a chance to do the same. Give them a chance to prove that we can run events safely and give people those experiences, which has a huge impact on the bottom line of these businesses.
Of course, inside capacity isn't just limited by the governor's executive order. It's also limited by some of these guidelines that the CDC has, including social distancing. If this does go well and restaurants show that there isn't a concern here, is there room to maybe grow capacity further beyond this executive order while still allowing for social distancing?
Yeah, Mike. I mean, I think we're rolling up our sleeves as we prepare for the 8th. And obviously there's other things that have gone on over the last couple of weeks of changes in guidelines, walk-up bars at private events. You look at restaurant bar seating with new restrictions where plexi doesn't need to be all the way around the bar. Obviously I know bartenders and bars and nightclubs have reached out to me, and we're trying to figure that out. I think we're trying to figure out, I want to reopen every area of our industry, but we understand it has to be done safely. So I think we're going to continue to work with Commissioner Lehman and obviously his team and the governor directly on, is it capacity? Is it, what other ways can we do to make sure that those businesses can make it through? And I think that's what you'll continue to see. I mean, yes, to your point, it's CDC guidelines. It's not a governor's decision on 6 foot or non-porous barriers. It's happening in Europe with 2 meters in the metric system. So, we understand we have to follow those guidelines. We're going to continue to do that. But I definitely applaud the governor for understanding that this is an economic crisis just as much as it is a health crisis, and how he can help our businesses survive.
What are some other things that the state and federal government can do? I mean, you mentioned funding earlier with the payroll protection program. Is that something else that the Restaurant Association is going to be pushing for, is more financial help?
Absolutely, Mike. I think, as I've been talking with our delegates down in DC and had spent some time with Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, and our other 5 House delegates, we need help down on federal level. I mean, I said to you before, the PPP funding was great when it was, but it was a 2-month program, and we've been 6.5 months now into this pandemic. So I think, we're hoping cooler heads down there prevail to help pass, a stimulus bill that gives it out to businesses that have been hit the hardest. You have to show hardship, Grant. You have to show hardship as your business, and you deserve that if that's the case, to help you make it through. And then on a state side, I mean, I'm understanding the state has their own challenges on a funding level, but there were CARES Act dollars that came from the federal government that the state has, and some other states have been putting grants out there for small businesses. I'm hopeful we can do the same. So, that's kind of our next step here is yes, we talked about capacity. Yes, we talked about guidelines, but, working with the governor, working with our delegates to say, okay, how else can we get funding and grant-based opportunities for these businesses? And I think we've talked about PPE expenses that they're going to have to incur. They've already incurred. They're going to have to continue to incur to run their business and do it safely. So where can we get help and support to offset those costs and not carry so much debt for these restaurants moving forward so they can make it through?
And we've been hearing so many reports around the country of fears that even as the economy gets going, so many restaurants are just so far in debt that they can't keep going. What are we looking at in Connecticut? Can restaurants stay afloat at this point?
Yeah, I mean, like I said to you before, Mike, every call on my phone or text is a worry of mine of hearing of a staple restaurant or staple caterer or private event that just can't do it anymore. And I think that's the reality. I mean, the New York Times put out an article saying over 25% of restaurants across the country won't make it to 2021. We had 8,500 restaurants pre-COVID. So you just take that number. I mean, that could be 2,000, 2,500 Connecticut small businesses that don't make it. That is the fear. That is they've carried a lot of debt. They were 2 months closed. They could do takeout, but they weren't able to open their doors from March 16th to May 20th for outdoor dining, and that probably took them a little longer than need to get ready for that. And then June 17th, and so I mean, there is a lot of debt that's being carried, and I mentioned the PPE expenses, the thousands and thousands of dollars they've had to spend to protect their customers and their employees, and to make sure they can stay open and follow these guidelines. So there's a lot of debt. It's a concern. This is a long road to recovery. My goal is to help them get through it, get to the other side of this pandemic, hopefully have a vaccine, back to normalcy. But even that, I said to the governor, this is your 2 years of your term. We're going to have to continue to talk about all small businesses in Connecticut, how we can support them and help them, because otherwise, I'm worried about where our state will be years from now because of the impact of this pandemic.
Thanks, Scott.
No problem. Thank you again, Mike, for having me.
Absolutely. And later on Face the State, student journalists are getting a crash course in reporting as they find themselves playing a vital role in covering the coronavirus. Up next, how voting by mail this election day could prompt legal challenges and delays in learning which candidates ultimately come out as winners. And don't forget, you can watch past episodes of Face the State on our YouTube channel. We'll be right back.